Okay, it's recording. Hey everybody, and welcome to my hometown. I decided to give you a little tour because I'm doing something today that I don't get to do very often, and that is really important. And that is, if you are near or you are headed toward any place where your family is from, it's a great idea to take a wander through the places that they were buried, the places that they lived, the places that they worked. I also went through another place today that it turns out is going to be a project in the reparational genealogy project. That was not my intention. I simply went there with my camera to shoot some very interesting shots, at least I think they're interesting, of a collapsing house. And the person who most recently lived in that house is someone I went to school with. So it was a little unlikely to find out that there's a rumor that the house was built with timbers from a slave ship, and that the family who owned it all the way back to the 1650s. So that was really stunning, especially since the family is African American and Native American. So all kinds of things can happen on Long Island if you look for them. First thing I want to do is I want to turn you around, and I'm going to show you. Oh, can I? Oh, are they serious? I can't turn you around. That sucks. I hate that about this. Okay. Anyway, behind me is Huntington Village. Wait, we're going to get there. That's a bit of Huntington Village. I can tell you that there is a gray building with a black awning on it, and it says Classic Galleries. I don't know if you can see it from here. Yeah, but anyway, it's the second building in. That was a fire station back in the day, and if you look at the windows, you can tell that they were originally doorways that they drove the skinny, yet I'm sure very up-to-date fire trucks out of in the early part of the 20th century. So that's pretty fun. I'm here today, though. This is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. I can only hope that this is not a bad shot because I can't see it. There we go. Okay. This is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument here in Huntington, and it's also the Huntington Town Historian's office, and the Huntington Historical Society is across the street. Now, we're very hilly here, as you can tell. We've got a lot of hills, and that's because we are on what is known as a glacial moraine. It means the glaciers came scraping everything that they possibly could until they got here, and as soon as they got here from Canada, they said, meh, we'll melt, and that was the end of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Huntington old burial ground real quick. The reason I want to take you in here is because it has some interesting historical value, and not just to me and not just to Huntington, but it actually has somebody who is buried here, who is important in larger American history. So the first thing is I want to show you that we have a lovely placard here that's totally backwards for you, but I'll tell you what it says. The old Huntington burial ground is a burying ground, pardon me, is one of the most historic and sacred sites in the town of Huntington, and it is. The 4-acre site is the final resting place for most of Huntington's earliest inhabitants. It is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is also a locally designated historic landmark located within the Old Town Hall Historic District. And that is exactly where we are right now, smack dab in the middle of that. This is the part where it gets interesting. It is unknown when the first burial took place here, but it is generally accepted that this site was used for burials since the founding of the town in 1653. The earliest recorded death in Huntington was that of Jeffrey Esty, or Easty, depending on how you say it. Okay, does that start to sound familiar to any of you? Easty, American historians, keep thinking about it, who died on January 4th, 1657. It is presumed that he was buried here. I can tell you that I've asked, and that there is no stone. They've never been able to find a stone for Jeffrey. He is my 10th great-grandfather, and he is also the father-in-law of Mary Town Easty, who was put to death in the Salem witch. Yes, it just got good, didn't it? Okay. The last burial here was Russell Sammis, who died on May 2nd of 1957. The Sammises remain a power in Republican politics here in Huntington. They're always elected to things. They always run things, or like to run things, or try to run things. We have our little biases here in Huntington about who runs what and whether or not people feel a little entitled, maybe, things like that. Anyway, the earliest grave sites are concentrated on the eastern slope of the old burying ground, which we're going to go to. We're on the western slope right now. The wooden markers first used here in the 1600s have all disappeared, obviously. The Jacob's Pillow fieldstone markers were obtained and used locally over a span of 200 years, and I'll show you some Jacob's Pillows. Let's see, some of these were inscribed by local masons. The earliest one is from 1717, and I can show it to you. Burials established family plots were permitted until, I see burials in established plots. Family plots were permitted until 1957. And the earliest grave sites, yes, going over there, we've got a few large flat field stones were also used, including that of Silas Sammis, which was inscribed by a local mason in 1723, and it is literally scratched in there. It's not fancy at all. It's not fancy at all. So I'm sorry I'm sniffing so much, but it's about 45 degrees out here, and I may end up having to pull out a tissue. It is just a sniffly day. This is a kind of an amazing thing in terms of colonial history and the history of the Battle of Long Island and colonial to national status for New York and for the 13 colonies. In 1782, after the American victory at Yorktown, Virginia, the British troops that had been occupying Huntington since 1776, because George Washington lost the Battle of Long Island, ordered the construction of a fort on the top of the old burying ground. Now, get this. This is, if they really wanted to make the colonists hate them, this is exactly what they should have done. Construction of the fort, known as Fort Golgotha, greatly enraged local residents and is the first recorded act of vandalism here. Town records indicate that at least 100 tombstones were destroyed. Tombstones were used to build fireplaces and ovens. Loaves of bread baked in those ovens were said to have had epitaphs imprinted on the bottom crust. It was in reverse, of course. The fort was occupied until June 1783 and was removed in 1784. Its outlines can be seen today, and if you look aerially, you can find them. So that's pretty awful. The ground fell into neglect after it was being used a lot less, and there was a lot of damage. And then the local chapters of the Sons and Daughters of the American Revolution, including the chapter that I am joining, began cleanup efforts in 1911. And now, of course, the vandalism went up and down and everything like that, but now it's a historical site and everything like that. I used to think it would be a really cool thing to come here and to have a picnic or hang out. We used to come here, friends and I used to come here just to hang out because, hey, say yo to the dead folks, why not? And I'm passing other live humans. Little video for YouTube. So, this is a Jacob's Pillow. Let's see. Can I show it to you? There we go. That is a Jacob's Pillow. It is simply a small stone that rises somewhat above the ground, and it marks a grave. That's it. And, then you have a couple of biggish monuments like this one to the Van Wyck family. If you've heard of the Van Wyck Expressway, it's the same family. There you go. And so that's a pretty big one. And it's from 1875. And yeah, they were from West Neck, Long Island, which is very close to here. It's actually a part of Huntington now. There were head and foot stones for the gravestones. So you'll see that there's like a little stone here. And that's not actually a child's stone. That's actually the footstone for one of these graves back here. So we're going to keep going up the hill. you can have the view of going up the hill. This is what it looks like. It's really quite beautiful. If you see the brown and tan Tudor looking building over the hill there, that was a trade school for, I think, for orphans, which is like really, I guess it was a good thing to have, but it's kind of sad. It's now the headquarters of the Huntington Historical Society. So we're going to keep going up the hill. Now, others of my ancestors are buried here. People with the surname Platt and Scudder, by marriage Conklin, Smith. They're names that are very well known. There's another Jacob's pillow. And these surnames are still on businesses and certainly on streets here in Huntington. This town was incorporated in 1653. So here's the weird part as I stop to get some breath. How is it that I grew up in this town and I never had any knowledge that I was from here? Well, nobody did the genealogy, but it turns out that through my mother's father's family, I'm descended of at least 10 founding families of Huntington. How we came to live here is a mystery because there's a good shot of Main Street. Because my parents both grew up in the Midwest. My mother was a military brat. My grandfather was born and raised in Indiana. How did that happen? Families moved. So this ended up being my hometown functionally because I started living here when I was 2. And, it turns out that there are a bunch of people buried here who are my blood. This is a very famous name, this surname, Conklin. Let me see if I can get you in there on Conklin. Can you see that? Yeah, there you go. The Conklins, there's a house called the Conklin House, and it was for a long time where the Huntington Historical Society was based. And it's reconstructed, remodeled, so it looks exactly like it used to, And so part of it is very early colonial, and then some of it is 18th century that was built on. And so it's this really cool museum. And I did a photo shoot in there. I can put links to those photos in my Etsy shop so you can see what it looks like. It's very, very interesting. Again, not everybody has this lineage. I understand that. Not everybody is descended of early families from colonial America, but if you are, it's a great thing to do. So what do I get to do? Right now I'm just a couple miles from my house, and I get to look at this. And it's really peaceful up here. I'm going to walk you up to one particular set of graves, which is very interesting. They're of the Platt family, and I am a Platt. They're my cousins. The Platts had a tavern, and it was called Platt's Tavern. Bet you didn't see that one coming. And when Finding Your Roots did the work for Ben Affleck, they found that he was a Platt and that he was directly descended of perhaps that Platt, but certainly he is a cousin. And when they found that he was descended of enslavers, because the Platts were enslavers during the 17th and 18th centuries, certainly the 18th century, he said, no, you got it wrong. I still have a lot of ire about that, and I still hold a lot of disrespect for Ben Affleck about that, because first off, they don't get it wrong on PBS, and second, because I don't have any time for that sort of like semi-guilt based thing where people are, denying that their ancestors were enslavers. That's just crap. Okay. We are in the neighborhood somewhere around here. The story goes that the Platts had this tavern, and their 2 enslaved people, a man and a woman, are buried here with them, and their stones are here as well. Shoot, I know I'm in the right place. Maybe I'm not quite in the right place. And the man was known, the enslaved man was known for being a great fiddler. And so people would come from miles around. Pardon me, I'm going to have to go for tissue. Oh, dearie me. It really is kind of cold out here. They would come from miles around to hear him play. And there's something about he got into a fight or he got his ear bitten off or something. It was not that he bit somebody's ear off. I think he got his ear bitten off. And so they would ask for the fiddler who got his ear bitten off. And that was how he was known. Okay, these are very hard to read, these stones. Williams Samus. Bear with me. Samus. Oh, here's a really good, here's Silas Samus's hand carved stone. This is a crazy, crazy stone. Oh, sorry, my wallet fell. There. Can you see? That is just literally done with a chisel or something extremely crudely. And it says, something, IVLV, 1723, Silas Samus, and that's all it says. That's all it says. Gosh, I wish I had the town historian with me because he'd be able to tell me exactly where the stone is. Anyway, that stone for the Platte fiddler, the enslaved man who was a Platte fiddler, and for the woman who also was enslaved by the Platts and the Platts themselves. They're all buried together, which is kind of interesting. Makes you wonder how it is that people think about the enslaved people and their families. This White House across the street is my DAR chapter's house. I've only been there, I think, once, but one more document and I'm proven in. You know, I'm just so incredibly Anglo-American. Excuse me again with the sniffles. 100% Anglo-American. So these kinds of things I used to take for granted. These are trips, these are things that anybody can do, that everybody can do, but you know, they're really not. So, you know, if you have something around you and it's not your kin, it's not your people, it's not your descent, go and do this anyway. It's just fun. It gets you in touch with dead folks. And if you volunteer for Find a Grave or Billion Graves, just take a picture of every single gravestone and then check it out, see if they're all up online. And if they're not, load them, because people really like that. People really, you know, feel strongly about having access to that kind of information. I know I really do. I really like it. I'm going to do one little wander over here to see if I can find these plats, and if I can't, then I'm going to go ahead and hang up. But we're on the eastern slope right now. So this is what the graveyard looks like from the east. I'm not real clear as to why everybody faces west. I don't know if that's like some religious thing or if that just happens to be how it is. But this is probably over there are the earliest graves, and there's absolutely nothing there because the stones, those could be among the 100 that were destroyed by the British. But the British are really jerks. Jeez. Rogers. These are all names that are Huntington names. They're Long Island names. You find them all over Long Island because people owned enormous amounts of land. Enormous amounts of land. Bayless. Okay, one more wander down here. Let's see. Interesting things like here's one. They bolted it back together. Can you see it? It's very hard to read in that dark stone. Memory of Charity, relict of Azel Lewis, who died September 9th, 1788. That would have been very shortly after the British left, which is pretty interesting. And the word relict, of course, means wife of, which is like, what, leftover? That really kind of always has annoyed me. I've never really gotten that. Here's Phoebe, the relict of John Bayliss. She died in 1816, and it looks pretty much the same. There are some things that are these like flying angel heads on the tops of the stones that are just super creepy, and I love them. Oh, the sniffles are getting worse, guys. I'm gonna have to put my hood up on my head. Elizabeth Wicks, her stone is going in the other direction. Ketchum, there's another one. It really gets interesting when you start to look at these things and you know what all the last names are. And people start being named like surname, you know, like Platt Conklin and Wicks Lewis and stuff like that. And it's just like, oh my gosh, you guys, seriously, stop with the intermarriage. Sometimes there are baby stones